Well, mates, we've finally reached the home stretch with a final 10 favorite Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids episodes. At number 10, we have Grandmother's Footsteps. What really sells this episode for me is the fact that Uncle Grizzly at first is about to introduce the episode, but he then transmorphs into the boy from the theater and he says, "That's better. Now we can begin," as he flicks on the switch of the camera, and then we are led into the main story, where it starts off on a dark, stormy night, and then we see a boy and his grandmother living alone in a huge house, and the grandmother tells a lot of spooky tales to the boy, especially one in particular where it involves a young boy named Julian who moved into a very old house but is constantly threatened by a lot of ghosts that inhabit this very place. And this episode is just so awesome because of how creepy it is, and it just uses its dark and spooky atmosphere to the best of its abilities, really making this episode shine in its own unique way. At number 9, we have Simon Sulk, and I am a major fan of this episode because of our titular hero. Simon Sulk is really annoying, but it's the type of annoying that is at the same time rather charming because, yes, he shouts and screams and stamps and sulks, as his nickname suggests. He sulks all the time because of the fact that he and his parents are about to move to Devon, but Simon is so persistent in his absolute vehemence of not wanting to move that he does a lot of things like soil the parents' paintings, throw his new school uniform, and a lot of crazy things about this character. And this episode manages to make a great use of foreshadowing, from Uncle Grizzly's barbecuing to the documentary that Simon watches on television before his father interrupts him, and even the victims of the documentary almost bearing a striking resemblance to the Thorsfelts, the new neighbors that the family of Simon are about to have when they're about to come over to move. And I really like this episode because there is one moment in the opening segment where Spindleshanks is sulking because Uncle Grizzly stated that he doesn't like children, and Uncle Grizzly proceeds to snap at Spindleshanks, stating that he doesn't like the taste of children, and proceeds to call him a stupid spider, which is just so hilarious at just how he says it. But the episode really sells it in terms of its great use of foreshadowing and our titular anti-hero. At number 8, we have Mr. Peeler's Butterflies. In this tale, we see an absolutely annoying half-pint by the name of Alexander who just doesn't want to go to sleep until he has everything that he needs to go to sleep, like toys, a glass of water, and his favorite pajamas, and all these crazy things. And his parents constantly have to deal with their bratty half-pint of a son who can't end up going to sleep. So there is this one saying that children who don't go to sleep have a visit by the mysterious Mr. Peeler, who has a butterfly collection which look really strange and don't really look like butterflies. And he just visits you and he just takes away the sleep that you have. This episode is just so creepy in its execution, mostly due to the titular Mr. Peeler. This old guy is so frightening, threatening, and he will definitely want to make you take a bath after just witnessing what he can do to any kid who doesn't go to sleep. This episode is creepy, but also a must-watch, mostly due to the episode's half-pint, Alexander, who has a charming type of annoying, and also to the titular Mr. Peeler, who will definitely leave you awake before you can count to 10. Number 7, we have a tie between Bogman and Bessy. These two I put on the same entry because they involve two young ladies who refuse to clean up and are then greeted by something supernatural. In Bogman's side, we have Helen, and in Bessy's side, we have Bessy. These episodes I really enjoy because of just how quotable these episodes really are. And in terms of Bogman's case, we have this really wonderful quote from Helen's mother. "Helen, in future you will stay in the kitchen until the washing up is finished, because if you don't..." And then Helen proceeds to say, "If I don't, what?" And the mother states, "If you don't, then as sure as night turns to day, the Bogman will get you." And those lines alone were just my main reason of putting this episode rather high. And it's just so enjoyable watching these characters wondering, oh, what could go wrong when something like this is about to happen. But unlike Bessy, Helen is a bit more organized, but she doesn't like to help with cleaning up the kitchen. But with Bessy's case, my goodness, is this young lady an absolute pig. It also doesn't help that their brothers, Damien from Helen's side and Callum from Bessy's side, always have to do the cleaning up. So overall, these two episodes solidify the fact that you better clean up your stuff, otherwise something is about to go down with you. At number 6, we have the new Nanny. Now this is the first overall episode of Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids, and it started off with a bang. We are introduced to two little brats by the name of Tristram and Candy. Now their parents are just constantly going to work, yet have little to no time with their kids, which is no wonder why the kids act the way they are to their long-suffering old nanny. And throughout the story, we are then introduced to several new nannies in the forms of different animals. The first one that comes in is a snake. The second one that comes in is a spider. Yet the next one that comes in is, spoiler alert, an alligator. And let me just say that what the alligator nanny does to the children is something that they did not want to regret. So this was definitely a very great start to what was one of my most favorite British animated horror comedy anthology series of all time. And it definitely was a wonderful start, and we are just introduced to how crazy this grisly world is through this very episode. At number 5, we have A Tangled Web and When the Bedbugs Bite, because these two episodes talk about bugs in general. In A Tangled website, we have spiders, but in When the Bedbugs Bite, we of course have bedbugs. A Tangled Web really deserves special mention because the main kid of this episode, Nigel, is one of the creepiest, most disturbing, and one of the most cruel little shits that you will ever see. This guy is so cruel to spiders that it doesn't help that his strange fascination just leads to an overall obsession. Not to mention his habits of clicking his tongue and rolling his eyes around. And it just makes him even more disturbing as a character because of those traits. Whether it's the external traits of just how many times he clicks his tongue, to the rolling of his eyes, and even to just how he exclaims that he is a spider, and more appropriately, a Black Widow spider, and he tells himself that he is Black Widow Nigel, and he has spiders for breakfast, makes him all the more terrifying that there are times I almost shat my pants when this character was on screen. And with that said, he was just the absolute highlight of A Tangled Web. With When the Bedbugs Bite, we are introduced to Hannibal, who has really sharp teeth and has the horrible habit of biting people all over the place. But at the same time, there is a little bit of a supernatural element where we see an answering phone and a block of ice, and there is a sort of a wish granting witch that is able to grant all the goodnight wishes to all the children of the world. And let's just say that when it comes to Hannibal's parents' wish for Hannibal, it is something that he might end up living to regret when all is said and done. At number 4, we have Prince Noman and the Barber of Civil as they deal with body parts and what they're being used for. In terms of Prince Noman, it almost works like a traditional fairy tale, albeit in terms of its dark origins. It feels like I'm witnessing a fairy tale from the Brothers Grimm come to life. And if you know any of their fairy tales, then you'll really understand the reputation that these fairy tales have when it comes to something that is so gruesome. And Prince Noman does it very wonderfully with our title heroine, Queen Letitia, and her absolutely horrible relatives-in-law, and of course the fact that she has to marry the old king and bore a son. And when the king proclaims that his son should have the same name as his, that it should be strong and manly, he closes the deal with it, but during the announcement day, he forgets his reading glasses and states that his son's name is Noman. And this causes the newborn baby to be invisible. And what really sells this episode for me is just how clever and resourceful Queen Letitia is. She is definitely the main highlight of this episode because she is definitely one of my most favorite Grizzly Tales characters of all time, as she is definitely a strong heroine in her own right. Now, when it comes to the Barber of Civil's side, we are then introduced by two horribly rude children, Peregrine and Tanya, who constantly torment their teachers until an unknown barber comes into Saucy by Sea to give children a well-deserved haircut appointment. But it's not hair that he cuts off, oh no. And once you get the reveal, you will definitely feel terrified by this gentleman. So overall, Prince Noman and the Barber of Civil are really, really awesome episodes when it comes to the fairy tale-like elements coming into play. What with Prince Noman having a very Grimm Brothers-like approach, and with Barber of Civil having a very eerie approach to the overall story. At number 3, we have a tie between the Decomposition of Delia, Dethabridge and Goblin Mountain, as these two basically deal with books. The reason why I really love the Decomposition of Delia, Dethabridge is because, let me ask you this. Have you ever encountered anyone who comes off as not only an elitist snob, but also an absolute know-it-all, that he or she just has to shove it in your face that this person knows everything than you do? Well, that's what this episode basically tells about. A know-it-all girl by the name of Delia Dethabridge who thinks that she doesn't have to do homework and thinks that she can get away with her excuses, but at the same time constantly calls out some of her fellow classmates for not being at her level. At the same time, she also develops an inferiority complex, thinking that she is above everyone, until one fateful day, the other teacher, Mr. Pune, gets terribly ill from a bizarre disease, and who else comes into the picture but a very strict teacher by the name of Miss Whetstone. And she sells this episode for me because of her no-nonsense, strict teacher ways that she implements upon Delia. But at the same time, as soon as Delia is about to be finished writing about her worst nightmare, an assignment that she should have done days ago, the gremlin from her story comes to life and basically wants to do something to Delia in a way that will make her just the total opposite of what she is. And the ending of what happens to Delia is so satisfying. And when it comes to Goblin Mountain, we have a young boy by the name of Joe Alexander who loves to read. But at the same time, every time he's finished with any book, he rips off the pages and he throws them into the wind, where it all leads up to Goblin Mountain. His parents scold him, but he refuses to listen until he encounters a forbidden book where he tears the pages and he is placed on trial by a band of goblins. So these episodes are really creepy in their own special ways just because of the supernatural elements that come into play. With Delia's side, it's gremlins coming into play. But with Joe Alexander's side, it's goblins that are coming into play. And these two episodes work so magnificently. Number 2, we have Fat Boy with a Trumpet. And what really sells this episode for me is the main bully, Johnny Bullneck, alongside his 4 goons. And true story, I've dealt with a lot of people who bully me for almost little to no reason other than to show that they're a lot bigger than me and smarter than me and a lot of other really screwed up things. And I kind of had my fair share of certain people who did act like Johnny Bullneck, but unlike them, they weren't as physically horrible as him, though at the same time, they were kind of psychologically disturbing. And with Johnny Bullneck's case, he's a character I seriously love to hate because of how much he reminds me of all the bullies that I had, especially one person from my former batch who was such a pain in the ass that she constantly called me a fail and just loved to do things to me that made me feel bad about myself. Oh, yes. There are times that Johnny Bullneck certainly reminds me of my personal bully in that really weird way, but at the same time in a very hilarious way. And aside from Johnny Bullneck, we are also introduced to the new boy, Timothy, who is very well known for having the God-given talent of playing the trumpet. But poor Timothy is constantly under Johnny Bullneck's horrifying wing, and he is constantly tormented, constantly being thrashed upon by Johnny, and he even gets framed by Johnny and is basically spending detention writing that he will not take his clothes off in public ever again. And you can't help but feel bad for Timothy. Your heart totally goes out to him, especially if you've been in a situation like that. But what really sells this episode for me is what happens to Johnny, especially when Timothy has his glasses taken away from him by Johnny, and when Tina comes in to stop Johnny and to chide him, the children cheer them on, and Timothy proceeds to wail it on Johnny, and we get to see a close-up of Timothy's non-bespectacled face, and while it does look bizarre and creepy, it is just so satisfying in terms of Johnny getting the first strike. But the second strike of what happens to Johnny is not gonna be that easy on him, as it will end up becoming super painful. You will have to watch the episode yourself, but let's just say it's sweet of what happened to Johnny. It is just super, super sweet. You cannot tell how absolutely satisfied I was, let alone elated of how his demise went. So overall, Fat Boy with a Trumpet was a surprisingly relatable episode, yet it still manages to have a lot of fun and is very enjoyable, especially when it comes to the opening and ending segments. The opening segment really does deserve a lot of special mentions because Spindleshanks enters with a wound up toy with a conductor doll on the podium, and every time Spindleshanks plays it faster, the conductor also plays faster, and it's basically to the tune of the William Tell Overture. And Uncle Grizzly states to Spindleshanks that it's not a lightning conductor, and Uncle Grizzly states that Spindleshanks might as well have it his own way. And Uncle Grizzly, funnily enough, states that Fat Boy with a Trumpet is a true story. Yeah, I highly doubt that. But I really like how in the ending segment that Spindleshanks didn't get hurt and just ends up having a ball with Uncle Grizzly. A definite must-watch, especially when you really just want to have a rollickingly great time to see a bully like Johnny Bullneck get what's coming to him. But I'm sure you want to know what my all-time favorite Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids episode is. And that honor has to go to The Chipper Chums Go Scrumping. I know it's a surprising choice to certain people, but hear me out. This episode is great on so many levels, in my opinion, in terms of everything it has to offer. We not only have one kid protagonist in the story, but 5 kids. And their names are Ginger, Cole, Algie, Sam, and Alice, and their dog Stinker. Now at face value, you might think that this is basically almost like any book that you've read from Enid Blyton, most notably the famous 5 series, as the first moments of this episode tells the tale of 5 kids who are about to go on a picnic and just have a great old time in the outdoors, and they just have a lot of fun together. And you really get to see the great character dynamics that Cole, Algie, Ginger, Sam, and Alice have. Ginger is basically the leader of the pack. Cole is basically the smart one. Algie is the posh one. Sam is the big tomboy. And Alice is not only the tag-along kid, but the little girl of the group. And Stinker is definitely the team mascot. So the fact that you really get to see all of these character interactions really coming off of these wonderful characters is just so well done. And just how it builds all the way up to the very end will totally leave you by surprise. It is just so well done in building up its atmosphere. It is just so well done on a lot of levels. And the ending will leave you so gobsmacked, and it just comes out of nowhere. But at the same time, it will just leave you both gobsmacked and totally upset that these kids had to meet such a demise. But at the same time, it is a very well done episode in terms of its build-up, in terms of its character dynamics, and in terms of everything that this episode had to offer. And that is why The Chipper Chums Go Scrumping stands tall as number 1 on my top 25 favorite Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids episodes. Well, that's all for now. I would also love to hear your favorite Grizzly Tales for Gruesome Kids episodes. So post it on the comments below. And until then, this is Antoni signing off and wishing you all a good night.